My name is Sophia Lawson. I'm 42 years old and work as a pediatric nurse in Chicago. I've been married for 15 years to my amazing husband Jonathan, and we have two wonderful children, Emma, who is 12, and Jacob, who is 9. About 3 months ago, I experienced an event that forever changed my life. Clinical death. It was Tuesday evening, and I had just finished my shift at the hospital. I was driving home, looking forward to a family dinner. The last thing I remember is stopping at a red light just a few houses away from my home. According to witnesses and the police report, a drunk driver ran the red light and crashed into my car at high speed, directly into the driver's side. The impact was devastating. My car was completely destroyed, and I lost consciousness, suffering serious injuries trapped in the wreckage. What happened next is hard to describe. I felt like I was floating, completely detached from my body. There was no pain, only a sense of lightness. From above, I could see the crash site, the wrecked cars, the wailing of the approaching ambulances, the paramedics desperately trying to pull me out of the debris. Despite the severity of the situation, I felt an indescribable calm, as if everything was under control. Then I noticed a bright, warm light above me. It was something completely different from anything I had ever seen, soft, pure, and incredibly inviting. I felt a strong attraction to this light, as if I belonged to this place. As I moved toward the light, I was surrounded by a sense of unconditional love, so deep and overwhelming that no earthly experience could compare to it. And then I saw him. He was standing there with his arms open, welcoming me. His presence was so real, so tangible that there was no doubt. He looked at me with a smile that expressed warmth, compassion, and understanding. At that moment, I felt that my being was fully known. All my mistakes and weaknesses no longer mattered. The only feeling that remained was a sense of perfect and infinite love. Jesus embraced me, and in that moment I understood how deeply he loved me, in a way that human words could never convey. It was as if I had finally realized the depth of his love. There was no fear or doubt, only peace and the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. This was, without a doubt, the most transformative moment of my life. Jesus began speaking to me, and his voice was both gentle and full of authority. He said, "My beloved daughter, there is so much I want to show you. Come and see what I have prepared for you and for all those who trust in me." He extended his hand, and as I took it, we were swept away by a rushing, moving force as though we were flying. What opened up before me was indescribable. We soared over landscapes of breathtaking beauty, clouds shining like liquid gold and silver. I saw majestic mountains and valleys filled with flowers in such vivid hues that it seemed they couldn't possibly exist in reality. There were rivers and crystal-clear waterfalls that seemed to dance and radiate a bright, almost magical light. It was heaven, far beyond anything human imagination could encompass. But despite all the stunning beauty of the nature around us, it paled in comparison to what Jesus showed me next. We arrived in a city that was beyond imagination in its luxury. It was vast, perfect in every detail, completely unlike anything I had ever seen on earth. The city was located in a flawless square, with tall jasper walls that shone like polished glass. There were 12 gates, each made from a single enormous pearl. The streets were paved with pure gold, yet with a crystalline transparency that gave off almost a supernatural glow. The foundation of the walls was adorned with precious stones of all colors: sapphires, emeralds, amethysts, topazes, and other such beautiful stones that I could scarcely name. Jesus looked at me with tenderness and said, "This is the holy city, the New Jerusalem, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." He explained that this city was the eternal home he had prepared for all who follow him. But what amazed me the most was the light. There was no sun or artificial light sources here. The entire city was immersed in a dazzling golden light. Jesus revealed that the glory of God himself is the light of the city. There is no darkness here, no shadows, only pure and eternal light. We approached one of the pearl gates, and as we entered, I was completely overwhelmed. The first thing I saw was a wide avenue that ran through the heart of the city. In the center flowed a river of incredible purity, the river of the water of life. Jesus told me that this river is the source of eternal life. On its banks grew magnificent trees of life. Each tree bore 12 different fruits, one for each month, and its leaves had the power to heal the nations. Around me there was a radiance of peace, perfection, and love. Jesus patiently guided me, explaining every detail as my heart overflowed with gratitude and awe. At that moment I realized I was standing before the fulfillment of God's promises, as vividly described in the scriptures. This was the heavenly paradise. It was real. Jesus led me to what he called the Father's house. It was so wondrous that the word house could not capture its full grandeur. Imagine a vast palace complex stretching to the horizon. The architecture was both familiar and completely supernatural. There were giant towers, large courtyards, and endless corridors. Everything was built from the most precious materials: gold, platinum, crystals, rare gemstones. But what struck me the most was not the wealth, but how this place felt so welcoming. Despite all the luxury, it was not a cold display of riches. On the contrary, every detail radiated a sense of home. As we walked, Jesus smiled and said, "I will show you what I have prepared for you." He led me down a long corridor with many doors along the way, each with a unique design. We stopped in front of one of them. "This is for you," he said. When he opened the door, I was left breathless. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. Perhaps the word room didn't quite fit. It was more of a heavenly dwelling. Everything was perfectly tailored to my taste and personality. The colors, the furniture, even the artwork on the walls were astonishingly familiar, yet even more magnificent than anything I could have imagined. Jesus looked at me and said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions. I have gone to prepare a place for you. This is your eternal home, a place where you will live in perfect communion with God and other children of the Father." As I explored this space, I realized that every detail was deeply personal. One painting on the wall caught my attention. It depicted moments from my life on earth, the times when I showed love, kindness, and compassion. Jesus smiled and said, "These are the treasures you have stored up in heaven through your actions." Another remarkable moment was a bookshelf full of diaries. As I approached, I noticed they were diaries. Flipping through them, I saw that each page contained my prayers and conversations with God throughout my life. Jesus explained, "Every word you spoke in faith to the Father is precious, and it has been preserved." Then I saw a display case with medals or trophies. Jesus explained that these rewards symbolize faithfulness and obedience in various aspects of my life. He added, "Although all who believe in me are also loved and accepted here, there are different degrees of reward, depending on how they lived on earth." The depth of this concept touched me deeply. This was not just a place of rest. It was an eternal dwelling, carefully planned and filled with meaning. Every detail reflected God's infinite and personal love. Jesus led me to a large hall, which he called the banquet hall. It was a beautiful place with a table that seemed to stretch into infinity. Jesus explained that this would be the place where all of God's children would gather to celebrate eternity in perfect communion. The vision was so welcoming, a picture of joy and celebration that would never end. As we walked through the city, I saw people more than I could count. They came from all nations, tribes, and languages, just as described in the Bible. Everyone was full of joy and peace, worshiping God and living in perfect harmony. And it was at that moment that my eyes met familiar faces. I saw my grandmother, who had passed away when I was still a teenager. She looked young, full of life, and so vibrant. I also recognized a friend from college who died in a car accident. They warmly embraced me. Their words were full of hope and joy. "We are so glad you're here, even if it's only for a moment. Your time has not yet come, but we await the day when you will be here forever." The emotions of that meeting were overwhelming. Tears of joy flowed down my cheeks as I felt a peace I had never experienced before. Jesus, watching everything with a gaze of infinite love, said, "I want you to see and feel what awaits those who believe in me. This is the promise I gave to all believers. Share this hope with others so they know that after this earthly life, there is something greater." He turned to me and said with a warm smile, "I am proud of you. You have been faithful to what I entrusted to you. Keep loving others and leading them to me. Your reward in heaven will be great." The depth of his words touched my soul. At that moment, I felt such joy and peace that all doubts and fears simply disappeared. I knew without the slightest doubt that I was deeply loved, that I had a divine purpose, and that the best was yet to come. "It's not your time yet," said Jesus. "You have work for me on earth. Remember what you have seen and share it with others." He embraced me again, and in the next moment, I felt myself being returned. When I opened my eyes, the physical reality hit me with full force. I felt intense pain and the bright lights of the room. I heard excited voices around me. I was in the ICU. After 3 days in a coma, I finally regained consciousness. The transition was a shock. Part of me didn't want to leave that peaceful, immeasurably joyful experience I had lived through. But at the same time, I felt a new sense of purpose. I knew that my mission on earth was not yet finished. This experience changed everything. I am no longer afraid of death. I know exactly what awaits me on the other side. But I also gained a new understanding of the value of every day we have here. Every moment is a gift, and every act of love has eternal consequences. My faith has become stronger than I could ever imagine. I used to believe in heaven and eternal life. Now I know. I have experienced it for myself, and this certainty has completely changed my perspective on life, death, and my mission here. I know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is real, that his love for us is immeasurable, and that he has prepared an incredible future for all who believe in him. This certainty is what I want to share with as many people as possible. The size of the heavenly city I saw was beyond human imagination. Jesus explained that it was 1,400 miles in length, width, and height, forming a perfect cube. Imagine a city stretching from the east coast of the United States to Denver and reaching unimaginable heights in the sky. The dimensions were simply overwhelming, but at the same time, everything seemed perfectly organized. Despite its enormous size, the city was incredibly easy to navigate. I saw beautiful parks and gardens everywhere. The buildings were magnificent. Each one had its unique purpose. Some appeared to be learning centers. Others were dedicated to creativity or worship. Everything was connected by golden streets that glowed with almost supernatural light. I remember there was neither sun nor moon. The light was everywhere, yet not concentrated in one point. It seemed the atmosphere was filled with a warm golden glow. Jesus explained that this light is the very glory of God, illuminating every corner of the city. There was no night, no darkness, no shadows, only perfect and eternal light. The temperature was another impressive feature. It was neither hot nor cold, but simply comfortable, as if the climate had been created to bring pleasure. The air was incredibly pure and fresh, and everything around me radiated life energy, as if everything was a reflection of God's presence. The city was filled with people more than I could count. They came from all possible ethnic and cultural backgrounds, from all age groups. They all wore dazzling white garments, and their appearance testified to perfect health and inexhaustible vitality. I briefly interacted with a few of them, and what struck me most was the love and joy radiating from each one. There was no place for fear, distrust, or shame here. Everyone genuinely united with one another, with joy and excitement. The community was filled with pure love, where each connection reflected the perfection of the divine plan. The activities were as varied as the people themselves. I saw groups gathering for classes, resembling study or discussion sessions, while others created works of art and music of indescribable beauty. There were people tending to the gardens and parks, but every action was filled with joyful meaning and purpose. This was not work in the sense we understand it, but an expression of creativity and service that brought immense satisfaction. And the music. It was indescribable. It seemed that every note carried a piece of the heart of God himself. The melodies filled the air and directly touched the soul in a way that human words cannot express. This was not just something to listen to, but something to feel, experience, and be transformed through. This experience completely changed me. It strengthened my faith and gave me a new perspective on life here on earth. Now I know without a doubt that what awaits us is far more glorious than we can imagine. and this inspires me to live each day with purpose, gratitude, and love. In the city, music played constantly, like a heavenly symphony that never stopped. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere at once and filled the air with a divine melody. I heard choirs singing in perfect harmony, instruments I had never heard before, and even what sounded like the elements themselves, wind, water, and even light, joining in the melody. It seemed that all of creation was tirelessly praising God, a praise that was not only heard but felt deep in the soul. This music was not just beautiful, it was transforming. Every note seemed to reveal something about God's nature, His glory, His love, and His holiness. There were no words to fully describe this experience, but I can say with certainty that it was overwhelming, as if God's very heart was beating through this symphony. Jesus explained that while salvation is a free gift, received through faith, there are rewards in heaven based on how we lived on earth. He showed me a scene resembling a heavenly ceremony where believers received crowns and other honors directly from His hands. But what amazed me most was that everyone who received these rewards immediately cast them at Jesus' feet. It was an act of worship, acknowledging that all the good they had done was, in fact, the result of His grace and strength. He emphasized that rewards are not based on great deeds or public displays of piety. Rather, God values small acts of love, kindness, and faithfulness, often unnoticed by human eyes. Jesus showed me scenes of people being rewarded for patiently caring for sick family members, for quietly giving to those in need without seeking recognition, for faithfulness in prayer, even when it seemed like nothing was happening. This was a deeply encouraging realization that every action, no matter how small, is noticed and valued by God. When I asked Him about time in heaven, Jesus explained that it functions entirely differently. There is no pressure, no rushing, and no sense that something is about to end. At the same time, there is no exhaustion or wasted moments. In eternity, we have all the time to explore, learn, create, and grow in our relationships with God and with each other. This is an exciting concept that is hard for our earthly minds to fully grasp. What especially struck me was that, although our understanding in heaven is far greater than here, we do not become all-knowing. Heaven is a place of continuous discovery. Jesus showed me libraries full of knowledge, a place where new skills can be learned, and endless opportunities to explore the wonders of His creation. He said that we will grow in our understanding of His love and glory for all eternity, making heaven a place of constant awe and renewal. Activities in heaven were perfectly balanced between rest and action, between personal moments and fellowship with others. I saw people who were enjoying deep relationships, engaging in fascinating conversations, and working on creative projects together. It was a completely harmonious society, free from conflict or misunderstanding, where every interaction was filled with love, respect, and joy. But the most impressive part was the constant presence of God. There was an unquenchable awareness of His glory, and every action, whether large or small, seemed to reflect worship to Him. Everything in heaven, from relationships to activities, revolved around this love directed towards God, creating a sense of purpose and fulfillment that cannot be replicated on earth. This vision of heaven was not only comforting but also inspiring. The realization that there is such a magnificent place waiting for us gives life here a new perspective. It doesn't matter how small or insignificant our actions may seem, they have eternal impact. This belief changes the way we live today and encourages us to love more, serve more, and joyfully await the day when we will forever be in the presence of our Redeemer. It seems like the perfect fulfillment of what we were created for. He took me to a place He called the visualization space in the Father's house. It was a magnificent observatory with windows opening to the most stunning landscapes I have ever seen. Jesus explained that I saw the renewed earth, similar in many ways to the world we know but free from the consequences of sin and destruction. The view was breathtaking. Vast untouched forests, crystal clear lakes and rivers, majestic mountains and green valleys stretched all the way to the horizon. The colors were brighter than anything we can imagine on modern Earth. The animal world lived in perfect harmony. Lions lay next to lambs, just as predicted in Isaiah. There were no signs of pollution, death, or decay. "This is a beautiful image," Jesus said. He explained that when we are on the renewed earth, we will be granted the joy of exploring and guarding His creation. He offered adventures and discoveries beyond our imagination. But most importantly, he emphasized that, although this new earth is incredible, our greatest joy and focus will always be directed toward our relationship with God. This depth continued in the next significant moment of my experience. Jesus brought me before the great white throne, where all of humanity had gathered. He showed me how each person's life would be reviewed. Thoughts, words, and actions would be revealed before the throne. For those who placed their faith in Christ, their sins were covered by His blood, and they found redemption and peace. But for those who rejected Him, it was a terrifying scene of judgment, facing divine justice without the protection of Jesus' sacrifice. It was heartbreaking. He showed me a place of complete darkness and despair, entirely isolated from the presence of God. Jesus explained that this was never His will for anyone. However, He respects the free will He gave humanity. Those who choose to reject His offer of redemption ultimately choose this eternal separation. This vision awakened a much greater urgency in my heart to share the gospel. Understanding the reality of eternal separation from God made me realize how crucial it is for people to understand the choice they are making in this life. This made me bolder in speaking about my faith and inviting others to get to know Jesus. I saw countless angels during my experience. Some were in constant worship, while others appeared as messengers or guardians. Jesus explained that angels are beings created to serve God and play an important role both in heaven and on earth. I had brief interactions with some of them. They were incredibly beautiful and powerful, but also humble and completely focused on God's glory. One angel confided in me about how they rejoice every time a sinner repents and turns to God. But what moved me the most was a place called the Room of Incense. Inside, there were golden bowls that, as Jesus explained, contained the prayers of God's people on earth. I could see how these prayers, like incense, ascended before the throne of God. It was a deep and beautiful image. Jesus showed me that every sincere prayer is heard and valued, even if the answers don't always come as we expect. The realization that our prayers have an eternal impact gives meaning to communion with God and trust in His sovereignty. He reassured me that God always responds with His perfect love and wisdom, even if, due to our limited perception, we cannot always fully understand everything. This assurance brought me deep peace. Jesus led me down an incredibly long corridor with countless doors. He explained that each door leads to an individual apartment created for each believer. When He opened the door to my apartment, I was stunned. The space perfectly reflected my personality and everything that brought me joy. It was spacious and filled with light. The colors were my favorites, soft blues and greens. There was a cozy reading nook with shelves full of books, a piano, and other musical instruments. I saw materials for drawing, a telescope for stargazing, and many other things I love. But everything was perfected, far better than anything I could imagine on earth. Jesus explained that He knows us deeply, and these spaces are created to reflect our unique personalities and the deepest desires of our hearts. He added that these apartments are not static. They grow and change as we develop in our relationship with Him, dynamically reflecting our ongoing journey with God. He showed me several other rooms. Each was completely unique. One looked like a vast library, another like an art studio with breathtaking views. He explained that in heaven, we will have the opportunity to explore and develop all the gifts and interests He has given us, without the limitations we face on earth. He took me to a place called the Watchtower. From there, I could observe events on earth. What impressed me was how differently everything looked from a heavenly perspective. What seemed incredibly important on earth often appeared insignificant. In contrast, small acts of faith and love shone brightly, like lights dispelling darkness. Jesus explained that God is deeply involved in human life, fulfilling His plans even amidst chaos or apparent meaninglessness. He emphasized that God's ultimate plan is redemption and restoration, and that all events on earth are moving toward this great purpose. He showed me the strong connection between the church on earth and the saints in heaven. He called them the great cloud of witnesses, as mentioned in Hebrews 12. I saw that the saints in heaven are aware of and interested in what happens on earth, especially in the lives of believers. They spiritually support us as we run our race of faith. Jesus also conveyed a clear message, a message of hope and urgency. He wants people to know that they are deeply loved, and that He has prepared an incredible future for all who trust in Him. But He also emphasized the importance of living with eternity in mind. He warned about the danger of becoming too attached to the things of this world and losing sight of what truly matters. Our focus should be on God, loving our neighbors and seeking His plan for our lives. He stressed the importance of staying connected to Him through prayer and studying His Word. Jesus also warned against false teachers who distort the message of the gospel. These reminders are of immense importance and have deeply impacted me. Since I had this experience, I've become much more focused on what really matters. Material things, career achievements, or worldly success have lost their significance in light of the more important task: loving God and loving others. My life is now much more purposeful, especially when it comes to sharing my faith and demonstrating Christ's love to everyone I meet. I understand that this may seem unusual, and I admit that I might have been skeptical before I had this experience. But I know what I experienced and I feel compelled to share it, regardless of how others react. For those who doubt, I want to urge you to pay attention to the evidence. Not just my story, but many similar testimonies from people around the world who have experienced clinical death. Although the details may vary, there is a striking similarity in what people report, prompting us to reflect more deeply on the reality of eternity. What I experienced deeply aligns with the scriptures. The idea that Jesus is preparing a place for us, the focus on God's love, and the central importance of our relationship with Him. All of this is rooted in the Bible. However, my experience expanded my understanding, especially regarding heaven as a place for continuous growth and creativity. This perspective, while not always emphasized in traditional teachings, fully aligns with the character of God revealed in the scriptures. Without a doubt, the greatest revelation was in the depth and reality of God's love for us. Everything I saw in heaven, the beauty, the joy, the perfect peace, stemmed from God's incredible love. And the most remarkable thing is, we don't have to wait until we die to experience this love. It is available to us right now through a relationship with Jesus. I want to emphasize that everything I experienced was real. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was more tangible and alive than anything I've ever experienced in physical life. The love I felt, vast, perfect, and transformative, has changed me forever. I want everyone to know that this love is available to them too. My prayer is that all who hear this will be inspired to seek a deeper relationship with Jesus and live with eternity in mind. Heaven is real, more wondrous than we can imagine, and it is available to all who place their trust in Christ.